Hoy día tenemos dos invitados realmente de lujo. Tenemos el honor de tener al doctor Miki Halbertal, el director del Hospital Rambam en Israel, y también el doctor Aaron Chihanhofer, profesor del Technion en Israel. Ambos son científicos y médicos de primerísimo nivel. Miki es médico, pediatra, ha trabajado en urgencias, tiene un magíster en Health Administration y dirige el Hospital Rambam, que es un hospital que trabaja de la mano con el Technion, que es la universidad que está al lado en Haifa. Y they have developed a very interesting innovation culture between the hospital and the university. As I was telling you, Miki is also a researcher. He has done stuff on clinical trials, recently vaccines, and so on. We're really honored to have you here. And also, well, you may already know, Aaron, he is also a physician with a PhD, postdoc at MIT, and he discovered with other colleagues the ubiquitin system. He got the Lasker Award, the Nobel Prize in 2004, and his discoveries paved the way to novel therapeutics for cancer and currently for neurodegenerative diseases. So guys, thank you so much for being here. It's a big honor. Stage is yours.
Okay. So thank you very much. I used to be once a physician. Now I'm pushing papers, but it's fun. It's interesting. Maybe later on we can discuss. I think that we are sitting together during lunch. We can discuss, why to move away from the bedside and to become a paper pusher. But we'll have time to do that. So I would like to thank Andy and the team of the faculty to inviting us. I will tell you a little bit about Rambam. I can sit here for days and talk about the hospital. Obviously, we don't have the time. And then Professor Chihanhofer will replace me. So I know that I'm challenging you with my English, but let me start by showing you a short clip about the hospital, and it's in Spanish. So,
Rambam Healthcare Campus es más que un hospital, es un activo estratégico para el Estado de Israel. Ubicado en Haifa, Rambam sirve como centro de referencia para 12 hospitales de distrito. Somos Rambam, un lugar donde la innovación pionera, la investigación y la academia son las piedras angulares de nuestro ADN, colocándonos a la vanguardia de la medicina en todo el mundo. El tiempo es crítico para salvar vidas. Creamos una aplicación pionera de gestión de accidentes cerebrovasculares para diagnosticar rápidamente y tomar decisiones. Realizamos más intervenciones de accidentes cerebrovasculares que cualquier otro hospital en Israel. En Rambam, la investigación innovadora es impulsada por nuestros pacientes. Muchos de nuestros excelentes médicos dirigen la investigación médica de una amplia gama de temas, todo orientado a mejorar el futuro y dar vida a la ciencia. Creamos un centro único de investigación de cannabis medicinal, el único de su tipo en el mundo. Rambam MedTech, nuestra empresa de transferencia de tecnología, identifica ideas innovadoras, ayudando a nuestros investigadores y médicos a crear productos médicos patentados, comercializados de calidad mundial. Somos socios de la incubadora de salud digital MindUp, junto con las principales compañías tecnológicas mundiales. Utilizamos tecnología basada en Big Data e inteligencia artificial, permitiendo una mejor y más precisa atención al paciente. Nuestras colaboraciones con las principales instituciones académicas y de investigación crean un entorno que apoya la innovación y excelencia. Somos el único centro en el norte de Israel que proporciona tratamiento oncológico multidisciplinario. Nuestra investigación clínica y translacional asegura mayor disponibilidad de medicamentos experimentales, colocándonos entre los principales centros a nivel mundial. Albergamos el único hospital infantil del norte de Israel y somos reconocidos a nivel nacional por nuestra excelencia. Los niños son nuestro recurso más preciado. Mientras cuidamos a nuestros pacientes jóvenes, siempre recordamos que un abrazo y una sonrisa también son útiles. ¿Qué nos hace líderes en el estado del corazón? Rambam está a la vanguardia de la medicina cardíaca. Nuestros pacientes se benefician de las más avanzadas tecnologías y cuidados. Nuestros departamentos de cardiología y cirugía cardíaca ofrecen tratamientos integradores. El Hospital del Corazón de Eyal Ofer está listo para ser el nuevo hogar para ambos departamentos. Como parte de las disciplinas emergentes de medicina regenerativa y de precisión, nuestro revolucionario vanguardista Stem Cell Center desarrolla soluciones personalizadas, terapias biológicas para diferentes trastornos cardíacos. Estamos siempre preparados para cualquier escenario posible. A partir de las lecciones aprendidas de la Segunda Guerra del Líbano, cuando civiles y soldados fueron atendidos bajo fuego, fortificamos el Departamento de Medicina de Emergencia y construimos un estacionamiento subterráneo que se transforma en un hospital de emergencia subterráneo fortificado, el más grande de su tipo en el mundo. Tratamos a más pacientes de trauma que todos los demás hospitales israelíes. Personal médico de todo el mundo acude al centro de enseñanza de Rambam de trauma, emergencia y situaciones de víctimas masivas para estudiar nuestro modelo de gestión de emergencias. Asesoramos y ayudamos a establecer instalaciones médicas y estamos orgullosos de salvar vidas a nivel mundial. Al mismo tiempo, nuestros equipos profesionales recibieron entrenamiento para enfrentar este enorme desafío.
Noticias de última hora. Tras el estallido de la guerra Espadas de Hierro el 7 de octubre de 2023, el Hospital Rambam preparó de inmediato su hospital de emergencia subterráneo fortificado Sami. El mayor del mundo en su género. Como el hospital demostró su excepcionado tanto para los pacientes como para el personas en el conflicto, incluyendo algunos postraumáticos tratados en nuestra
Una misión. Nuestros equipos es la Hensley Health con el apoyo de una profesión. Es una forma de estar.
Sorry about this, but what you can see over here is the medical faculty. So we are two separate organizations. This is run by the Technion. We are a government hospital. Remember this picture because I will allude to that at the end of my lecture and tell you something that we are planning for the future. we are called Rambam. Rambam is an acronym for the Maimonides. Maimonides was a Jewish philosopher, a rabbi, and a physician. He wrote a huge amount of literature at the 1100. He used to be stationed in Egypt and in Spain. And he used to be obviously the physicians of all the royalties at the time. And he wrote a huge amount of literature. And his literature is amazing, extremely innovative in many areas. And think of it, in the 1100, he said that you cannot separate body and mind. And we take lots of pride of being called Rambam. This is the vision of the hospital. Probably it's more of the same like any other big hospitals in the world. Obviously, our main mission is to give the best medical care. But at the same time, we need to to teach and educate the next generation in all fields, in all sectors. And also, we have to deal with research and innovation. The dealing with research and innovation is not something nice to have. We believe that research and innovation, if we will not be extremely involved in it, we will not be relevant because it has huge significance on the quality of the healthcare that you give and the quality of your staff. So you'll see that we are extremely invested in giving the healthcare. The other reason that I'm showing you the vision here, that we are now, for the last 3 years, developed a master plan of the hospital for the future. When you do something like this, and future, you'll hear at the end, what do I mean future? You have to go to your basics, and the basic is the vision. Everything is built up from your vision, and this is how you create your work plan and the master plan. The emblem of Rambam is medicine, but all the branches of the tree, right? The emblem of Rambam is the tree of life, and the trunk of the tree is the medicine, and all the branches of the tree is bridges to so many other things, like bridge to peace. You know, whoever comes to our doors, we treat. It doesn't matter who. We are now hearing what's happening in Syria. In 2013, when the uprising started in Syria, Israel opened the border, though we were in a state war with Syria, and we used to get casualties, thousands of them. Altogether, for about 6 years, almost 9,000 casualties. They used to come to Rambam. We used to treat without asking any questions and send them back. Some of them came more than once. And another one is collaboration, exactly what we do here, because, in 2025, we cannot work by ourselves. There's no islands anymore. We have to work together, because if you want to do especially research, innovation, populations, and stuff like this, working together, it's a major thing that we believe in. And also the philosophy that we have is that the knowledge that we gather is not ours. It's for the sake of mankind. So if we learned and has lots of experience with trauma, emergency preparedness, we are ready to share the knowledge that we gathered in order to help other places around the world. So Rambam is located in the northern part of Israel. It's only this. It's very small. We are covering the northern part of Israel, level 1 trauma center, and the tertiary care center. So it's about 3 million people and 12 district hospital, and obviously the IDF. Haifa is known to be a multicultural city. So 30% of the staff of the hospital are non-Jewish, are Arabs, and we work shoulder to shoulder in harmony with all the episodes and things that are happening around us. And I don't have the time to show you, but many I can show you. How do we work together? And it's a non-issue, because the mission that we have is the same mission to treat patients. And I think that this is something very important. Number-wise, 1,100 bed hospital, the campus that we saw, we are just, was asked to run another hospital, psychiatric hospital, so we're going to add another 240 patients and beds and another 600 staff. So altogether, we are now in Rambam campus, 6,200 staff of the hospital, and looking at the numbers, you probably been in hospitals, and this is like every big tertiary care center. It's a huge activity of in the hospital, emergency room, inpatient. But to me, the 500 clinical research every year of the staff, this is more exciting because, this is part of the obligation of the staff to teach, to do clinical work and to do research, and most of the staff do not get any protected time for that. When you talk about research innovation, at least once you have to say ecosystem, you have to say holistic, and you have to say AI. Otherwise, you know nothing about, research and innovation. But what we have over here, we have us as the clinicians in the hospital. Just across the street, we have the basic science of the Technion. The Technion is, and Aaron will speak about it, the Technion is a engineering university, and it's very unique to have a medical facility connecting to engineering university. Harvard and MIT mimicked from us. Joke. But the same idea, right? And so we have the faculty just next to us, and obviously the engineering faculty is just 25 minutes away, and the Haifa University that has the settled area of medicine, the allied profession, nursing, and some brain science, and the industry. When you put everything together, it promotes and provokes dealing with research and innovation. This is, you saw the tower, so we are just now, in the next 6-8 months, we will start to open the Hemsley Discovery Tower. It's a 20-floor building. 14 floors are going to deal only with research innovations. It's owned by Rambam, so obviously we'll be there. The Technion will be there. Hopefully the Haifa University and the East Industry. And we are joking that we are going to put there coffee machines that will work extremely slowly, that people will have to speak to each other. And all the problem will come from the bedside into the labs of the Hemsley Discovery Tower and bring solution. We are level 1 trauma center, the biggest trauma center in Israel. And this is obviously, people hear about Israel say war. I'm not talking about the war. This is regular trauma that you see here and all over the world. So about the quarter of the trauma that comes to in Israel comes to Rambam. So this is all numbers, but the new numbers, 1,100 casualties with severe injuries. So ISS, injury severity score, for those of you who don't know the scoring system, over 16, right? So severe injuries, and then hospital next after us is less than half than the numbers. And obviously, even in those days, the number consists to be very high. So you see that not only the quarter of the trauma comes into the Rambam, quarter of them are those with severe injuries. And if you look at outcome, your chances of, if you come to Rambam with severe injuries, to walk out of or still be alive when you leave the hospital is 94%. And this is what, if you work hard, this is what you get. Because of that, we have the teaching center for emergency preparedness. We go around the world, as I said before, share the knowledge that we gather. We don't have to come here to teach people how to treat a trauma patient. You know how to treat a trauma patient. The question is how you get the system to work together, right? From the EMS into the hospital and some other issues in those extreme scenarios that it's not matter of when or if, it's just matter of when. And I'm talking about earthquake. You just had an earthquake about a few days ago. I will say that this is not earthquake. I heard this. For me, 6.3, no, it's an earthquake. Well, that's fine. So we go around because this is what we are facing. And if we will not be efficient in those extreme scenarios, we won't be able to save enough lives. So this is extremely important. Just to tell you one example about the clinicians in the hospital, the industry, and the researchers. Everybody knows Parkinson's disease, essential tremor. Everybody knows that the ganglia here is provoked in the tremor. Not good solution for Parkinson's disease, and obviously the drugs are not great, and all kind of invasive procedures. Other issues. So a company in the entrance of Haifa named Insightech built a special helmet that you put on the patient head that is totally awake in the MRI. This helmet produces 1,000 beams of ultrasound that concentrate in the ganglia in the brain. And by using hyperthermia, on in layman words, cooking the brain from the outside, right? Just working on this area of the brain. So we were the better side of this about almost 10 years ago. And just to show you, this is the second patient that we had. And you can see a young patient, because in this picture is younger than me. And you see, this is before and after, 3 hours apart without a scratch on his body, right? And you see this, everybody drank something this morning, right? He couldn't drink, he was waiting to die. Really low quality of life. 3 hours later, one time, 94% success rate, right? No side effects, almost. And you bring somebody back to life. This is what we're trying to do, right? All of us. Look at his smile. This is what we're trying to do. And some other issues. This is, by the way, a Syrian soldier that came with a gunshot wound to the lower jaw. Obviously, you cannot reconstruct this. And this was done by the maxillofacial surgeons and did the 3D printing. Oh, I didn't have the picture of the printing, but anyway, they installed 3D printing of his lower jaw, and obviously he was sent back to Syria, came again with another injury. Just to show, it was mentioned about the underground parking lot. I will not speak about it, but this is the area. So you can see how big it is, about 20,000 square meters, 5 acres, that basically we have 2 hospitals. We have the regular hospital that work usually. We have an underground hospital, totally fortified, without any compensation. Every patient has the same, like he has above ground, and obviously we can work in every scenario and do our mission to give healthcare. And this is how it looks, by the way. You can see in a parking lot mode, hospital mode, and you can see how it looks like. So I would like to end in something different. As a CEO of a hospital, there's always a question, where is your responsibility finishes? I believe that there is no limit to responsibilities. So about 3 years ago, Israel is now 10 million people. And demographically, we are increasing one of the highest in the world, 2% a year, without looking into immigration, right? And aging quite quickly. The life expectancy for women in Israel is 3rd in the world, and for men is 5 to 6 in the world. And we have not enough beds already now. And if you look for the future, by 2048, when Israel will be 100, will be 14.5 million, and by 2065 will be 20 million. So we need more beds, even with home hospitalization and everything else, but still you need more beds. And nobody planned. And nobody asked us to do anything about it, but I thought it's our responsibility. For the last 3 years, we were trying to look into the future using all the managerial sector of the hospital, about 1,000 people looking into the future. Prophecy is for the full, right? But still trying to plan, and we built a new master plan of the hospital, how the hospital will look like until 2065. And this is a very short clip to show you how it's being built, because somebody needs to pay for it. By the way, we accept cash, credit cards, bits. Managing a hospital is a huge challenge. It requires looking beyond the horizon, beyond the day-to-day, and sometimes making tough decisions in crisis situations. As the CEO of Rambam and also as grandfather, I find myself wondering how we will care for these children's medical needs 20, 30, or even 40 years from now. Profoundly committed to pioneering medical services in northern Israel, both now and in decades ahead, the entire management team has come together to shape a common vision and an intergenerational master plan that will secure a healthy future for all our children and for many generations to come.
9 or 10 new high-rises, some with more than 30 floors, will gradually replace most of the current buildings, making the campus 5 times bigger than it is today, with 2.5 times more beds. This will enable us to fulfill our vision for a campus where health and well-being takes center stage and where we can provide the best medical care to everyone who comes to our doors. From using stem cells to repair damaged organs through innovative imaging technology, state-of-the-art laboratories will help our medical teams provide patients with the best possible care, including slowing the aging process and preventing disease through early diagnosis. This medical campus promotes recovery and prevents illness within a healing environment that is not a luxury but an absolute necessity, where all the inpatient rooms, treatment centers, and open areas will convey the calm, relaxing atmosphere. Rambam will be a shining light for medicine, a beacon where research, innovation, and advanced technology are combined. Future generations will be taught how to keep dreaming, building, and healing. I've been working at Rambam for 37 years, including the last 4 years as CEO. This is, to my mind, the most significant event of my term, bigger than a pandemic, bigger than anything else I will ever do. A groundbreaking master plan for a groundbreaking medical center. Rambam 2065, creating the future of medicine.
So in this room, we all sit and we have the same mission and the same commitment, the commitment for the patient. Thank you.
I guess we can ask at the end after.
Yeah. יאללה, זה טוב. איפה את מצגת שלו? לא, זה שלי. אוקיי.
Pero no está ahí. Sorry.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aaron Chikanover. I'm a faculty member in the Faculty of Medicine of the Technion. There is a pointer here? Yeah. So this is this building you see here that Miki showed you, and this is the hospital. I'm a physician by training. I did half residency in surgery, then gave up. And the reason that I gave up on surgery was because I went to medical school. My mother forgot to tell me one thing, important one, that in medicine there are patients. And I never intended in my life to treat patients. So I left medicine and went to do a PhD. And during my PhD in the Technion, we discovered the ubiquitin system, which became very big. I'm going to tell you about it. For protein degradation, it became now a major platform for drug development. It's a multi-billion-dollar market now for treatment of malignancies and advancing very quickly into neurodegenerative diseases. And I think that the interesting lesson, I don't have much time, but I'll give you the frame of how you think of a problem in biology and how you approach it. I think that it's a prime example, and in that case, it's going to close the circle that Miki started. So Miki showed you the practice of medicine. We went to a question that raised out of curiosity, what's still missing. But then the curiosity at the end leads to practical solutions, not by us, by others that see what's going on. And I think that this is the beauty of science. You don't need to do it with your own bare hands. Others are doing it once they sense that something important is being cooked. So let me start the story. So this is the beautiful city of Haifa and the port. And protein degradation, first of all, we had a strategy. We started the work in the late 70s. Israel was still relatively young, very poor. And you don't go to the highway. when you're in this situation, you go to the side way, because the whole world at that time was mesmerized with the genetic code. The information, the transmission of information from DNA to RNA to proteins. And we decided to go to the opposite side, to how proteins are destroyed. And people were not at all interested in destruction. I will not go through the whole map, but destruction is non-specific. You know, you can eat the best food in the best Chilean restaurant. I don't know whether you have here a Michelin Forks restaurant in Santiago, but it will take you 1 second to enjoy the food that's going via your taste bud, and then it's all going to the stomach and to the intestine and being degraded to amino acids. So nothing remained out of it. Let it be a 10,000, 20,000 pesos dish or a 3,000 pesos dish, doesn't matter. The fate is the same, and the reason is that we cannot take in foreign proteins. We have to digest them, to disintegrate them into amino acid, and to absorb the amino acid in order to build our own, because otherwise we elicit an immune response. So that's the reason. And so it's destructive and it's non-discriminatory. So what's interesting about it? Yes, there were some interesting features over there. And one of the features that people noted is specificity. So abnormal mutated protein, denatured protein, people noticed that they are degraded very quickly. Later on, they also noted that, and I'll show you some kind of data, that regulatory proteins like transcription factors, once you don't need them, they're going away. So there was something about the specificity that attracted, that people noted before us. So you need to look into the literature and to find something that maybe has a clue in it that cannot be explained by this massive destruction that occurs in the gastrointestinal tract or in the lysosome. So I'll show you what happened, because before we launched our attack on this question, we wanted to understand the field and what's going on, and whether we are not going to bury ourselves in the cemetery of academic life. So this was the thinking behind. Meanwhile, if we look in retrospect, it's very interesting, but the beginning was much more difficult. When you look now at accolades that were given to destruction, you see that it's all covered. The lysosome itself, along with autophagy, got 2 Nobel Prizes. One initially by a very famous scientist that I'm going to repeat, Christian de Dive, who discovered the lysosome. But I'll show you what's wrong with the lysosome. We said, is the lysosome sufficient, or there is something new behind? And then autophagy recently, a few years ago, to Yoshinori Osumi, a very good friend from Japan. Then people got the prize for apoptosis, which is destruction of the whole cell. We didn't want to look for destruction of the whole cell. We wanted to look for destruction inside the cell, but that keeps the cell intact. This was the issue. And then the ubiquitin system. So you see that the world of destruction really took its place on the mainstream, unlike the initial thinking that everything has to do with DNA and RNA and genomics and so on and so forth. And it became as important, I would say, as the world of construction. So we call it destruction for the sake of construction. So let's forget a little bit about the history, but the history has a lot to do with the Jewish people. One of them was Rudolf Schenheimer, a Jewish scientist that escaped Germany. Actually, he was fired during the rise of the Nazis to power. Many of the Jews at the same time came to South America. Many were settled here in Chile, many in Argentina, some in Brazil. And the roots of the Jewish community in South America is going back to Europe. They found very good shelter and very warm shelter in South America. One of them was Rudolf Schenheimer. He went to the United States, and I'll show you in a minute. He was kind of the founder of the field of the thinking. One of them was Albert Einstein. He left Europe because of anti-Semitism. He went to Princeton and did all the work. It's amazing because books were written on that. We really need to learn from history. I mean, we are a brick in this building. We didn't make this building. We are just on a continuum. And it's called Hitler's gift. Hitler gave a huge gift to the West by kicking out all these Jews. About 24 of them won Nobel Prizes on discoveries that they made in their original countries. But who enjoyed it? America, and England, and Switzerland later on. So this is called Hitler's gift. And one of them, of course, was Albert Einstein, but he escaped before the Holocaust. He just couldn't tolerate this discrimination and anti-Semitism, and he went to the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton. By the way, if you think again historically in big way, America is still regarded, it's changing now, as the capital of world science. You know, you look at the big institutions, we are not talking about Trump, but about Harvard and Columbia, Stanford, Southwestern in Texas, big MIT that I enjoyed very much, staying there for 6 years, big institutions, but America was not like that. American science until World War II was mostly phenomenological. The center was in Europe, in the Gesellschaft in Germany. Germany was the world capital of, and when the totalitarian regime of Hitler came, it was all destroyed. Science and totalitarianism cannot survive together. Science needs democracy, even fragile democracy. People from time to time wonder, why is it? What's going on? Why scientists, they can work in the lab? No, they are free people. They need to speak, they need to travel, they need complete freedom, well beyond the borders of science, well beyond the borders of science. So Rudolf Scheinheimer, without going into details, did simple experiment when he came to Colombia. He fed labeled amino acids into animals, and he saw that the amino acids are going into proteins and out of proteins. So he defined a new term, which is called the dynamic state of body constituents. So this was very strange, because until then, people thought, and even Nobel laureates thought, that we are static. What do you mean static? We are being born, babies. We are growing up until the age of 16, 17, 18, gaining our final weight and live with our proteins forever until we die at the age of 120. So, and this was a wrong thinking, but there was a big fight on this thinking. This was not accepted easily, that proteins are dynamic. Without going into details, I just want to tell you that you are destroying every day, 5% of your proteins. Some of them very rapidly. You know, transcription factor like P53 or MYC or JUN or FOS are turning over several times an hour. I-kappa B alpha, the inhibitor of NF-kappa B, the half-lifetime of NF-kappa of I-kappa B alpha is 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It turns over 12 times in an hour. And some of the proteins are long-lived. For example, hemoglobin lives 120 days in the red blood cell. Then it goes to the reticuloendothelial system in the spleen, and so on and so forth. But all in all, on the average, every day we are destroying between 7 to 10% of our proteins, which means that in about a month or two, what is today, the 18th of December 2024, so in the 18th of October 2024, I was made of completely different proteins, more or less, which raises many interesting questions. Besides the mechanism that I'm going to talk on in a minute, it raises how I'm still me. So if it's not me physically, how it's me spiritually, the memory, the passion, the imagination, the environment, which means that we need some kind of a mechanism to transmit the information that is being kept, mostly the high functions of the brain, while think about a computer. When you buy a new computer that's identical to the old one, you still need to take the software and move it. We don't need to take the software and move it to the new computer. It's being transmitted. So we have no idea what's going on. One idea is, of course, the mad cow disease, the imprinting of protein, that another Nobel Prize by a good friend of mine, Stanley Prusiner, that proteins can imprint themselves into other proteins. And I think that we learned a lot from the transmission of PRP, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and so on and so forth, that information can still go from protein to protein. We are not sure about it, but think about it. What's going on? I'm not myself today as I was 2 months ago, and nevertheless, I'm still myself. So, I mean, this is very interesting, and it belongs, of course, to the dynamics of macromolecules. Another feature of protein degradation was the requirement of energy. This didn't make any sense. Remember, we are eating proteins and we are deriving 4 kilocalories per gram when we digest them, like carbohydrates, 4 kilocalories per gram, lipids, 9 kilocalories per gram. So what is it that in intracellular protein degradation, we need to invest energy? This is protein degradation, doesn't matter. Regularly, if you take the oxygen from the incubator, you substitute it with nitrogen, you go to zero. It didn't make any sense thermodynamically because you still have to invest energy in already high energy macromolecule in order to degrade it to low energy ingredients, which are amino acid control. Whenever nature has to control processes, it pays with energy. I like to drive good cars, and I'll give you an example. You drive downhill your car. There are two ways to do it. Either you turn the switch off, you take your leg off the brake, and you drive, and this might be your last drive. Another way to do it will take more energy than climbing the same hill. How? You shift the gear down, and you push the pedal, the brake pedal, and you generate heat in the discs of the tires, and it will cost you more energy. Why? Because you don't want it to be your last drive. In order to control the speed, you have to invest energy. Nevertheless, you're going downhill. So this is a remote metaphor, but it tells you a little bit about the world of control. Control always needs energy. And we noted two phenomena when we designed our experimental, when we thought of a problem and designed the experimental approach. So this is Christian de Dieb, of course. First of all, we didn't like the lysosome. We said the lysosome is not the issue. Why? Because the lysosome acts by microautophagy. You know, it blebs in droplets of the cytosol, convert them into the vacuole, open up, and it's degradation. But remember, this little bleb contains all the proteins in the cytosol. Long-lived, transcription factor, everything. So it cannot be specific. But we learned from the literature that protein degradation is nevertheless specific. Look at half-life time. Some proteins live few minutes, some proteins live many hours, and some proteins live many months, like hemoglobin. This could not ever be explained by this mechanism. So we said, okay, there must be something behind. And there's something behind, and we define to ourselves, what is it? It's a highly specific proteolytic system that was not known before because proteases were not known to be specific, that requires metabolic energy, ATP, in order to degrade protein. And this was the initiation point of our journey. And I'll give you a very brief account of what we did, and then I'll jump quickly to medicine and to show you the evolving world of what's going on nowadays. So we are physicians. Physicians have some advantages, but endless disadvantages in science. They know a little bit of medicine, they know nothing of science. So what we knew about medicine, we knew about reticulocytes, the young blood cells, and we knew that the reticulocytes are maturing very quickly in the bone marrow to become mature red blood cells, which are very primitive cells. What mature red blood cell has? Nothing. Glycolytic enzymes, hemoglobin, some glutathione. Hemoglobin it needs, of course, to carry all the function, carrying oxygen, delivering carbon dioxide. Nothing else. No nucleus, no DNA, no protein synthesis. But on the way to become primitive cells, they degrade older systems. So we decided to use reticulocytes. Normally, reticulocytes in the blood are nothing, 0.1, 0.2%. So you induce them, you bleed the animal, you push the bone marrow to make a lot of reticulocytosis. We can jump up to almost 80% reticulocytes in the blood of the bunny. And we took the blood, and the blood didn't surprise us. And we found, indeed, an ATP-dependent system in the reticulocyte. One of my topics of my lecture is how embarrassingly simple it is to get a Nobel Prize. I mean, unbelievable. You need one key experiment, and I'll show you the one key experiment. And the one key experiment was published in a very high impact journal called BBRC. It's about 2 points, 1.8, which shows you this is one of the papers that was cited by the Nobel Committee. So you don't need nature and you don't need science, and you can forget about bibliometrics, and that's my philosophy in life. It doesn't matter where you publish, it matters what you publish. So remember this one. It's very important. We are subjected these days to a very wrong culture, very wrong culture. This is my first paper and the key paper. Both Avram Hershko, my mentor. By the way, my work that won me the Nobel Prize is my PhD. So graduate students are not all lost. Remember, you still have hope. So we published the paper, and the paper has one key experiment that was a paradigm shift. We found indeed in the lysate, in the cytosol, an ATP-dependent activity, which is non-lysosomal. Simply why? Because reticulocytes don't have lysosomes. Okay? So it's non-lysosomal. So you need to choose up the right system. And then, like we are biochemists, so we fractionated the lysate, this reticulocyte, the cytosol, in order to isolate the system. That's what biochemists are doing. Remember, this is 78. No molecular biology, no cloning, no cDNA, no plasmids, no vectors, no transfection, no transduction, no nothing. Zero, no CRISPR, nothing. No side-directed mutagenesis. Pure, elegant biochemistry. And we found on the column that we got two fractions. One of them didn't have any activity. The second one didn't have little, but we had to combine the two. This is a paradigm shift. You always need to look very carefully into your data. Why it's paradigm shift? Because proteolytic enzymes like trypsin and chymotrypsin can work by themselves. Here we needed two to the tango. Proteases can dance solo. They don't dance tango with a partner. In this case, it was a partner's tango. Now, one is one and two is very different from one. Why? Remember, this is a reticulocyte lysate. It has many proteins, not so many, but many. Fraction one can contain several proteins that may add to the activity, the same for fraction two. Without going into the whole story, I'll jump directly to 2000, when the first human genome was published by Nature in April of 2000, and the ubiquitin system was vastly exposed, and the number of the genes in the ubiquitin system, with the final version of the human genome that was published in Science a few months ago, is almost 1,500 proteins. It's the biggest family in the database for garbaging proteins. So why it's more sophisticated and more complex than making proteins? Because there are no DNA involved. No, remember that when we synthesize proteins, the information is embedded in nucleic acid. Here it's a game of only proteins. So you need many components, and I'll explain you in a minute why. To cut a very long story short, I will not take you to the complicated biochemistry. We worked out all the mechanisms. Took us about 6 years to put the system on wheels to understand the principles, and then many other people joined, and it's going like that. You have a protein that needs to be degraded. In order for the cell to recognize it, something must happen to the protein. The system will not take a normal protein. It will take something that happens to the protein. Either it's oxidized, misfolded, even if it's a normal protein like a transcription factor that makes antibodies for corona, but now we don't have corona, so why should I make antibodies to corona? I need only to keep the memory in B and T cells, right? So the transcription factor that is in charge of making the antibody to the capsid protein should be gone. Something must happen to this transcription factor, like phosphorylation, oxidation, nitrosylation, amination, acetylation, that the system will recognize. In this case, it's phosphorylation. It is being recognized by an enzyme called E3, or ubiquitin ligase. There are about 1,000 ubiquitin ligases in the database that all belong to the family of the ubiquitin system. And what they do, they bind the protein specifically. So each ligase binds several substrates. In parallel, a small protein called ubiquitin is being activated by E1. There is one E1 in the database, jumping to E2, and from E2, it's jumped to the substrate, and it covalently bound to the substrate. That was never heard before. This was completely novel. You know, people knew about phosphorylation, that is covalent modification. They never heard about a protein that modifies another protein. And not once, but several times. So the first ubiquitin bind to the substrate, the second to the first, the third to the second, to build a chain. And the chain is being recognized by a big protease, mega protease of almost 2 million Dalton, called the 26th proteasome, which became the target of the first drug that was developed, proteasome inhibitor. The hematologists, the oncohematologists know about it. And actually, the ubiquitin is a glue. That's what it is. It's a trans element of recognition. It brings together the substrate to the killing machine. And it brings it closer. It opens up the substrate goes in and degraded into peptide, not to amino acid. And that's very important. Think about COVID-19 and all the vaccines that we get. What happens? You get messenger RNA, not the Chinese vaccine, which is water, and not the Russian vaccine, which is another type of water. I'm talking about Moderna and Pfizer, real vaccines. You get a piece of messenger that makes piece of the capsid, right? The protein that is made is being processed by the ubiquitin system to peptides that are being recognized by cytotoxic T cells to elicit an immune response. So the ubiquitin system, among many of its functions, it's the arm of the immune system to generate antibodies that immunize us against all the viruses. Normally, we don't inject messenger RNA, but if I will now get a virus, the virus will generate foreign peptides, foreign proteins. The foreign proteins will be recognized as foreign by the ubiquitin system, degraded into peptides, being picked up by MHC class I cells, and elicit an immune response. So this is one of the basic and fundamentally important roles of the ubiquitin system, one of many. So you see that you need degradation also for eliciting an immune response. It's not just to get rid of a protein. Okay, then meanwhile, the system was discovered, was broadened. There are many other ubiquitin-like proteins like sumo. I'm not going to it. I want to jump very quickly to medicine because time is running out, and I want to show you how it was translated into a huge market, and it's still evolving in an exploding way. And this is the scheme of the ubiquitin system. So you have a single E1, ubiquitin go from E1 to E2 to 1,000 ligases, and then to thousands of substrates that are being targeted by the ubiquitin system. And now, why diseases? Well, for those of you who are in the medical profession, medicine is a profession of numbers, right? If you take Harrison or Cecil, look for the last 200 pages, all numbers. Blood pressure is a number, my height is a number, my weight is a number, my size is a number, my cholesterol is a number, my LDL is a number, my phosphate, sodium, potassium, everything is a number. My temperature is a number, right? 36.8. If there is a deviation from the number, it's a disease. Big deviation, can be, so proteins are the same. If I have hemoglobin that is 18, it's polycythemia, right? It's a disease. If I have hemoglobin that is 7, it's anemia, right? It's a disease. So everything is a disease. So all proteins are numbered. So if a protein, sorry for that. So proteins should be kept at a level, at a range. If they go below the range because they are excessively destroyed, or they go above the range, we are in a problem. So proteins are not any different from blood pressure, from height, from weight, from anything. So here you have one example, and this is not the main example, of proteins. These are brain sections of different patients that have early onset Alzheimer's. And the staining, the immunostaining, are of proteins that are already ubiquitinated, but they are not degraded. The proteasome somehow cannot constipate them. It's A beta, which is the hallmark protein that is accumulated in Alzheimer's disease. And in many ways, Alzheimer's disease, or all the neurodegenerative diseases, with no exception, are diseases of protein quality control. We accumulate aggregated protein. ALS, it can be TDP-43 or SOD. Parkinson, it can be Parkin or different mutations of alpha-synuclein. What else? Alzheimer, of course, A beta. And I can take you Huntington, polyQ expanded proteins. I can give you, all of them are protein quality control. All the neurodegenerative diseases, which are actually in the forefront of medicine right now, are quality control protein. The system cannot target them. But let's go to cancer, because in cancer we have done much more. So why the ubiquitin system in cancer? We can think of, again, of two ways, either excessive degradation. So if you have a tumor suppressor like P53, and it will be excessively degraded, you'll get cancer, because P53 is the guardian of the genome, right? Moshe Oren, you remember Moshe? Varda, in Weizmann Institute, who discovered this protein, is the human genome guardian. It's a tumor suppressor. When it goes away, in a disease called, very common disease called uterine cervical carcinoma. It's a woman disease of cancer of the cervix of the uterus, caused by whom? By a virus called HPV, human papilloma virus. What HPV is doing, it's a smart virus. Viruses are very smart. It encodes an oncogene called E6. It's an early gene. E6 go to the cell, of course, the virus goes to the cell, and it binds to P53. So it makes a heterodimer. The ubiquitin system looks at it and said, something is wrong here. I don't recognize this guy, and it flushes it down the sink. The ubiquitin system targets a good protein because all of a sudden it doesn't recognize it, and it exposes the cell to malignant transformation by other genes that are late genes of the virus. So the virus behaves like a rubber. When you go into the bank, you don't go to the safe. You go to the alarm system. And P53 is an alarm protein. It keeps the genome intact because the virus is a DNA virus. It cuts the DNA and integrates itself into it. But if normally it will happen, the integration, even the cutting and the integration, will be sensed by P53. But if there is no P53, there is no sensor. So then the virus can feel free to cut the DNA and to integrate into it. So you turn off the alarm system. So an excessive degradation of P53 will lead to cancer. Go to the other side, go to breast cancer. One of the most famous breast cancer is a mutation in the EGF receptor, right, in the HER2. The tail of the receptor is truncated and the receptor signal to the cell non-stop without a ligand, right? It remains only the cytosolic tail and it bangs in. This is mostly part of the work of Yossi Yarden from the Weizmann Institute. And what is the drug? Herceptin, right? The antibody. What Herceptin is doing, it takes the little tail that remains and clusters the receptor, and then the receptor goes into the cell and degraded, ubiquitinated and degraded in the lysosome. But normally, so if you have a mutation in an oncogene, and the oncogene is active, not degraded normally, you get cancer. So either excessive degradation of a tumor suppressor or an under-degradation of a growth-promoting oncogenic protein will lead to cancer. So you see how degradation plays a major role. Next step, drugs, right? So let's go to drugs. So the first drug that came to the market is a proteasome inhibitor. Remember, the proteasome is this mega proteases, and the inhibitor was developed against the active site, doesn't matter. It's a boronic acid derivative. And what is the mechanism of action? It's very interesting mechanism of action. So this is the drug. Well, this is the first generation. Now there are many, and it's being used all over the world, Chile, wherever you go. It's called Velcade, and it inhibits the proteasome. And it's very efficient against multiple myeloma. Multiple myeloma is a B-cell lymphoma. So there is a monoclonal expansion of the B-cell. It's a lymphoma. It's a malignancy of the blood. And the cells are generating lots of antibodies. So during the generation of the antibodies, you make mistakes like in a production like in Detroit. On every 100 car, 1 car is being shifted aside because there is a defect. If you are making millions of molecules and there are mistakes, those proteins normally are degraded, the mistaken protein, and the tumor continues. But if you inhibit the degradation system, these abnormal proteins come up and they induce a phenomenon called unfolded protein response, UPR, and the UPR kills the cell. So it's not a chemotherapy. The mechanism of this drug is novel. Therefore, this drug can be combined with chemotherapy and act synergistically. And this drug changed in a big way the picture of multiple myeloma. People died when I was a medical student within less than a year after diagnosis, in agony. Bone fracture because there is bone marrow, hypoxia because the tumor pushed the red blood cell out, infection, no white blood cell, bleeding, no thrombocytes, and so on and so forth. Now these people live 10 and 15 years in high quality of life. Some of them are being cured completely. So this was the first generation. Now came the second generation, which is a huge success, and with that I conclude the story. Here you see a patient with multiple myeloma. You see the galloping level of IgA. In this case, it's a B cell that secretes IgA. Chemotherapy helps a little bit, jumping back, complete response with Valcade, PS341. Complete response. Bone marrow, look at the bone marrow of the patient. 41% of tumor burden versus less than 1%. Normal bone marrow already. And one drug, because this was taken from the clinical trial. It's not the treatment. It's just the single drug, single modality. Okay, let's move to the next one. And the next one is a completely different idea. It's called PROTACs. And people say, okay, we have undruggable oncogenes like RAS. Okay, it's undruggable. And it's an awful oncogene. You cannot do anything about it. In brain tumor, in lung tumor, in the most malignant tumor, RAS is a killer. You can do one mutation in RAS in position 12, you got pancreatic cancer. It's awful. So how to drug an undruggable drug? An undruggable protein. What you do, you generate a glue. What is a glue? A glue is a material that can put together two things that are not related to one another. If I take a glue and put it on the bottom of this bottle and put the bottle here, they will stick. Right? So the molecular glues do the same. What they do, this is the molecular glue. It was magnified here. On one, it has two heads. One head goes to the ubiquitin system and binds to ubiquitin ligase, to the enzyme that conjugates ubiquitin to the substrate. The other head binds to the target. Let it be RAS, let it be MYC, let it be anything. And it brings them together. Now, this guy will now ubiquitinate this guy and will destroy it. All what we need them is to be together. So it glues together two things that don't belong to us, that otherwise will not recognize one another, and will degrade them. And it's now the biggest industry, one of the biggest industry in the pharma. All the big companies are doing now molecular glues. I'll show you one example. It's very interesting. You are all young here. You see the faces, most of you, not like me. There is a drug called thalidomide. People don't remember it. It's the biggest disaster in the pharma industry. 65, German-Swiss company came with this drug to treat the most common disease, vomiting during pregnancy. I don't know almost any woman that didn't vomit during pregnancy. And all of a sudden in Europe, babies with huge deformities came out. No legs, no hands, eye in the middle of the forehead. Awful, awful. And immediately it was linked to thalidomide. And I'll tell you the mechanism, because now it took more than 50 years to understand what happened there, because they didn't understand the mechanism. Now, thalidomide was buried, people forgot about it, but then the NIH, about 15 years ago, took it out, for screening. And they found that thalidomide, what's for screening cells, kills lymphocytes like hell. The lymphocyte can smell thalidomide from remote, it's dead. Why? Because thalidomide is a glue. It's a glue that take transcription factors, Aiolos and Icaros, glue them to the ubiquitin system by binding to another ubiquitin. You know, it's a miracle because people didn't think about it. It somehow binds this drug that was developed for vomiting, binds on one hand to drivers of cancer, and on the other hand to ubiquitin ligase called cereblon and degrade it. And it removes the oncogene from the B cells. So, but at the same time, it also takes away, it glues a critical growth factor, which is called MEIS, M-E-I-S, for degradation, and the limbs don't grow. There is also an issue with enantiomer, DNL. I don't want to go into that. The story is more complicated. But basically, the mechanism is degradation of a growth factor that is critically important for the development of the embryo, and it degrades it. So anyway, thalidomide is not a drug, but other drugs were developed like lenalidomide, pomalidomide, and they became real blockbusters. And you see, lenalidomide caused selective degradation of Z protein in multiple myeloma. So now it's part of the armamentarium. But that opened the road for the future, and with that I'm going to conclude. Because in principle, you can design a drug for any target. You have to take a library. Now we don't do it with a library. We do it with AlphaFold and with computational chemistry. So you take the structure of RAS and you design a molecule that will bind to it in high affinity. So this is half. Then you bind it to the molecule that binds to the ubiquitin system. And you have the two heads. And bang, you have a drug that will kill RAS, and there are RAS, anti-RAS killing products. What is PROTAC? Proteolysis targeting chimera. What is chimera? It's the Greek name for the two heads monster, right? It has two heads. One head binds to the target protein to be degraded, and one head brings the ubiquitin system in to kill it. So that's the story. And I think that it closes a circle because Mickey started with the practical practice of medicine. I left medicine to go to basics, and now I find myself back in the world of practice. And I think that this is a good lesson for basic sciences. You know, you cannot predict. Just don't predict. Don't be smart. You are not God. If you do good science, it ends up good. Doesn't matter where the drugs are coming, but it can end up by better understanding of the universe that we are. You know, we are doing astrophysics in order to understand the world that we are living in. So I think that that's the essence of basic science, to expand knowledge and then to benefit from it. And therefore, we cannot direct science. We cannot say, okay, people are asking me what I'm doing. I said protein degradation. I said, what is it good for? Can you cure cancer? I said, yes, you can cure cancer. Because people are expecting, and the politicians that have very long term are expecting people to cure cancer. But you cannot cure cancer without understanding mechanism. You cannot cure cancer without identifying targets. In order to cure cancer, you need to have a target, and the target is a drug, and you have to design the drug. So now AlphaFold can do it. So we need to understand the ecosystem of science. We cannot cure diseases we shall never approach Alzheimer or Parkinson without understanding the mechanism of aggregation and how to target these aggregated proteins in the brain. So I think that this is the lesson, and the key, curiosity and passion. And then the rest will come by itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. I mean, I know it's late, but if you have questions for Mickey and Aaron, please. In Spanish, in English, Hebrew, Ivan.
Yiddish.
Yiddish.
Not Spanish. Not Spanish.
Ivan.
Thank you so much. Maybe I think there are around 15 clinical trials with products. I'm thinking your card, and I'm thinking if maybe with products you are not losing the brakes, but are turning to just one target. What do you think about the maybe adverse effects of taking all the mechanisms directed the energy to one target that is regulated by products?
I didn't quite get the question. You know, I think that the first product is coming to the market soon by a American company called Arvinas of Craig Cruz from Yale. It will be a degrader of the estrogen, of the testosterone receptor for prostate cancer. So it will be like kind of a chemical castration. It's a new world. The issues are cell penetration, because some of them are very big, solubility, and so on and so forth. So it's not that simple as I described it, because I described the principle. The other thing is, I didn't go into details. Actually, thalidomide is not a product, it's an imide. So it's going into the cell and it changes the structure of the ubiquitin ligase so it will fit the target. And the prediction, the computational prediction, is much more difficult. So I think it will take a little more time, because the imides have the advantage that they are much smaller than the products, the big structure. So it will take time, but it's clearly the direction. It's clearly the direction, because you can design them. And you can do it by invitation. It will. Russ is already almost there. And Russ was a big guy. People looked at it like at the tip of the Everest. So there are difficulties, you are right. But I think that I am optimistic. I am optimistic. You need to design also the linker between the two, the length of the linker, the flexibility. Of course, I super oversimplified my description, but the principle is there and it's working. The lenalidomide, once you have one proof of concept, it means it can work. It will not remain single.
I have a question. What to expect with artificial intelligence? What's gonna happen?
What's going to happen? What?
With artificial intelligence.
With AI?
In medicine.
AI, for me, Mickey will tell about medicine. For me, AI is a tool. And I always believe, because I'm a human being and probably because I'm old, I believe that whatever we make, we should control. And I think I always bring very simple examples. It's an accessory tool. It's faster than us. It can look at the information. It can become smart. Now it's not so smart. It can scan the literature, but it cannot think yet. Maybe it can think but every tool that we ever developed had two sides. Think about Alfred Nobel. I always bring Alfred Nobel. He developed the dynamite. You can kill with dynamite, but you cannot imagine how you make tunnels in the Andes and drill oil without dynamite. So we should control it. It needs regulation, and it needs international regulation from hackers, because now we are in the world of clouds and computing and so on. So it cannot be just the country. It must be more international. I always believe that we are superior to what we make. So this is kind of an axiom, that if we make it, means that we are smarter than what we did, but we need to carefully regulate it. And I think, again, I said at the beginning of my talk about democracies. Totalitarian regimes are totalitarian regimes. They do what they want to do. Iran, I don't know. I don't want to put names here. We don't control it. But in democracies, let it be right or left, doesn't matter, it's changing. There are checks and balances, and we control the systems. And on top of it, very important for medicine deals with people. And people are people. When somebody gets cancer, you know it as a doctor, the world flips upside down. They need a human touch. They don't want to talk to a computer. They don't want to talk to a robot. They need to know what will happen to the family. They need to know whether they are going to survive, what will be the side effect, the suffering. and there will be never a replacement for us in the profession of medicine. So I try at my age, with whatever I have left to live, to be optimistic about it, that it's a tool that we develop. You know, initially I remember when I was at MIT in the 80s, people were frightened by molecular biology. You know, I worked in a P4 lab. You know what is a P4 lab? In order to transfect an E. coli with a piece of a gene, I had to go via 4 doors of under pressure. So everything will go in. You open the door, the air goes in. I closed the door, I went to another one, P4, because people were afraid that there will be leakage. And one E. coli will fly out of the window, and the whole city of Boston and MIT will be demolished. There was the Asilomar meeting, you don't remember it, with David Baltimore and Paul Berg, that put rules on this, you know, molecular biology was something, and now everybody's doing it on the table, and nothing happened. And, you know, it was P4, and I had, you know, a mask and 2 gowns, and it was crazy to make a fucking simple transfection of an E. coli. It was horrendous. So you see, it's coming and going. We get used to it and we control it, and hopefully it will be fine. Maybe Mickey will comment on medicine.
I think it will make, you know, the idea is to offload. We have to deal with what's important, not to deal with other things. It will do lots of offloading. It will maybe make us more efficient, more accurate, will not replace us. And if you think about the eye, you think that the basic thing about the eye is pictures, photos, right? X-rays, pathology, and you would expect that, you know, it's everybody talks about the eye, 10, 15 years, that this is the first thing that will happen, that we'll have a system that will basically, you know, just X-rays and say if it's good or bad. All the companies until now, there's already new stuff. Maybe something is coming up, something to do extremely basic, to tell us if the X-ray is normal or if there is any pathology in the X-ray. Still, we don't have it. So it will come in. There's no doubt, and we have to, but it will not replace physicians. Sorry.
Let me add one word about it. People would ask me, what is the single word in the vocabulary that I regard as the most important one? And out of the thousands of words in the vocabulary, it's education. It's education. The problem is, even with AI, that people believe, you know, they read Twitter and Facebook and all this junk, and they believe in it. And we need to educate people to think for themselves and to be critical. And then they can judge for themselves what is good. Think about the huge misinformation that went during COVID-19. Think about President Trump, how he dismissed my very good friend, Tony Fauci. Out, hydroxychloroquine and Clorox and ivermectin and all the nonsense about this, and anti-vaccine movement. People thinking, you know, you go out to the street and you ask people. Now Trump appointed the Minister of Health, the Secretary of Health, Kennedy, from a successor to the Kennedy family, who doesn't believe in vaccines. Polio out, COVID out, this out, everything out. I mean, if people will insist and fight against it because they will understand how important it is, the fact that we are sitting now in this hall 2 years after COVID-19 is due to one single fact: vaccination, science, technology. Otherwise, we would have been sitting at home half dead with masks. Our parents are already gone, you know, children are locked out from schools. It's all science and technology. People don't connect facts. Why life all of a sudden became free again? Why they can go to the underground, to the theater, to the restaurant, to enjoy life? 2 years we were locked in a prison, and people don't connect it. And we need to push education in the deepest sense of the word in order to get people overcome this nonsense. And that will bring also the limits to AI. It's okay to make diagnosis of X-ray faster instead of having somebody sits instead in front of the screen and looking at 2,000 a day and making mistakes. Well, the AI probably will do less mistakes. But that's a tool to overcome time shortage, but it's not something that replaces what we do need to do. So education.
So, gracias a todos por haber asistido a este tremendo seminario. ¿Ya? Eso. Almuerzo. Tarde.